Good afternoon. I'm Matthew Holt. It is October the 28th. It's THCB Gang. It is Thursday at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern, and we're ready to go. Who have I got on this week? Well, after our little special with Alex Drain solo, we're back to the more robust gang. We have Casey Quinlan from the Healthcare is Hilarious podcast, Mighty Casey. Rosemarie Day from Day Health Strategies, at Rosemarie Day on the Twitters, and recent publisher of a couple of articles on THCB. Jen Benz from Siegel Benz, and to keep the sort of the Y chromosome of my Y chromosome company, JL Neptune, CEO of Suntra Modern Recovery. So I hope Zoom now is annoying thing saying that this meeting is now being streamed, which I knew because I started the streaming. So I don't know why it's showing me that, but anyway, but we're all on. So let's kick off the way we always kick off with what we've been noticing this week and what is going on in the world. And I hope you got your finger on this pulse of what the hell's happening in DC. Rosemarie, so I'm going to start with you. But if you can tell what's in and out of this bill, you're better than me, but let's ask.
I know. I feel it's kind of like the hokey pokey when you said what's in and what's out, although mostly things are coming out as we need to skinny things down to meet the ever elusive targets that seem to be being driven by two senators, Manchin and Sinema, and it's a bit of a moving target. But there is, a call. I put faith in Nancy Pelosi to wrangle everybody into something, because this is the opportunity, even if it wasn't going to be as big, if it won't be as big as originally envisioned. So we're looking at skinny down things. We're looking at something for Medicare, probably around hearing. We're looking at something for the states that didn't expand Medicaid, but it's probably giving them an option to buy for free on the public exchange rather than doing an actual kind of Medicaid expansion. And we're giving up, setting drug prices. We're giving up a number of different things in the healthcare space, but looking at also sustaining the extra subsidies that people use to buy on the ACA exchanges, which would be pretty cool. And that right now the number is out to 2025. We'll see. Because of course the other side of the equation is where's the revenue and who are we going to tax on this? So I'll stop there. That's just the quick and on the health.
That's the quick hit. I remember having a conversation once with JL about the millionaires tax, and where we said we both wanted to pay it. And I would love to pay the billionaires tax. Don't get me wrong, but I think that's coming around anytime soon. JL, what have you been looking at this week?
So this week started off with a bang for us at Blueprint Health, for those of us who are still partners in Blueprint Health.
You have a deal.
One of our Portco companies, Rubicon MD, was acquired by Oak Street Health. So that was a big story for us and a great outcome for everybody involved. But I think is very much a marker of how much the digital health space has changed even the last 1 to 2 years, and how much exits and consolidation are really starting to pick up. And it's funny, we finished our last Blueprint class in 2016, and I'll tell you, there was very little M&A activity going on there, very few buyers, and the world has dramatically changed in a short period of time. And sort of the corollary to that is now you're starting to see just absolutely insane funding rounds. It's not even funny anymore, right? Every day I'll look at Rock Health, I'll look at Startup Health, I'll look at their summaries. I'm seeing 9-digit funding rounds, $100 million, $200 million, $300 million. And again, I think that says a lot about interest in healthcare, says a lot about what people think is maybe a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to remake a huge dysfunctional industry, hopefully for the better.
Well, we'll see about that. Although I think given this morning's funding round, which it was $400 million for Hinge Health on top of like the $300 million they had earlier this year, that's a back musculoskeletal play. We all better be developing back pain a lot. If you don't have a back pain now, you better get it, because those guys are going to get it. All right. Casey.
Yeah, well, I mean, my Mets recurrence started looking like a recurrence of my back issue. So yeah, back pain, but it's not always back pain. Even if it feels like it is, it's not always back pain. Well, anyway, this is, we're wrapping up Pinktober this week or this weekend. So because I'm, in the breast cancer community, pink is a thing. I don't wear pink. I don't wear pink ribbons. And I'm frustrated by the pinkification of things, particularly for those of us who have recurrences. Early stage puts you in line for being in the 30% down the road of a recurrence at stage 4. And so I'm in that lucky 30%. So yay me, I guess. But there's some stuff in this ginormous package that's still pretty huge, but has been given serious haircuts in all of this negotiation. But there's, the Cancer Drug Parity Act, which I'm keeping an eye on. And also there's, this is getting into the weeds on, health policy and regulation. But when you are diagnosed with metastatic breast cancer, you become eligible for things under Medicare and under Social Security disability. But in some cases, it takes 2 years, maybe more. You have to wait. And it's like, considering that survival rate, even with the current lines of drugs, is maybe up to 13 to 15 months. I can do that math. So we're trying to get rid of that. So that's been on my radar for the last few weeks. But, and then also hilariously, the one drug that has worked for the pain that I have because of the Mets, I have yet to find a Medicare Part D plan that will cover it. They tell me they want me to take morphine rather than the drug that has been in headlines forever because, hello, Purdue Pharma. Yes, I'm on Oxy, but an extended release Oxy, which apparently is the big bad. Even though it's a generic. And extended release Oxy is just terrible and you can't take it. We won't pay for it. So I'm paying $50 a month for it now while I'm trying to figure out during, open enrollment, if there is a plan D that will cover it. And the answer so far seems to be no. So stay tuned.
Interesting. I may have a comment or two about Medicare Advantage, Medicare open enrollment. Plan
well, I am not in a Medicare Advantage plan, nor will I ever be. So we can talk about that later.
We should. All right, Jen.
Adding on to that, I thought it was interesting to see this morning. I think it came out that, or maybe it was yesterday, that Merck is going to share the formula for the COVID vaccine with 105 developing countries. So I thought that's exciting news and kind of interesting how those decisions are being made. I have no idea in terms of which companies are deciding to play nice with the developing world or not. So that was good news that I think got lost in the headlines about everything that's going on in Washington. And then I think I've mentioned before, and Matthew just got attacked by his son.
Matthew just got attacked by his marketing.
Was that the tree falling on your house again?
Yeah, it's a meme.
It's not.
Stop falling on Matthew. That's this week.
Doesn't weigh quite as much as a tree, thank God.
Yeah. I was going to say, adding on to the cancer topic, I've shared before here that I had cancer when I was 19, and I have extensive screenings for other cancers that I'm now at higher risk for. And I think that is a whole area where the healthcare system just needs to do so much better. And the side effects from some of these screenings, and why do we have weird heavy metals and so many of these things? And it's just a crazy part of our healthcare system too. So happy to chat about that if we get around to that topic.
Yeah, I thought I would. I've had a couple of interesting things this week, other than the tree falling in my house and the sign falling on top of my head. I'm glad those two things were reversed. The tree missed the house and the sign hit me. But one of them is the jokey tweet, which I put out this morning, where someone sent me the picture of David Feinberg from Cerner with Judy Faulkner together, and I've got a tweet out saying, what's going on with these two wrong answers only. There's a quite an amusing line up on that. But the other one was, I've heard some interesting stuff about billing, and I can't quite tell the story yet because I'm trying to dig into it a bit more. Interesting stuff about some upcoding of billing of COVID tests, and COVID tests becoming office visits, and a lot of people with apparently their hands in the pie of that one. It may, I don't know if I talked about it on the gang before, maybe with you guys or not, but I've had the very interesting experience that I happen to be a Blue Cross of Massachusetts member, even though I live in California. And I got a check, as did my wife, from Blue Cross of Massachusetts for, I couldn't tell why, they just randomly sent me a check for $125. which of course I put in my bank account because I'm greedy. And I found out it was my vaccine. Somehow it had been gone through their processes and being an out of network thing. They assumed I'd paid cash for it, even though of course no one was charged on site for the vaccine. And I've had that now for a test as well. So far I'm making a profit by going and getting myself tested and vaccinated. So I'm going to do more of it. Eventually somebody will figure out that something's going wrong, but when that happens, I don't know. But
we believe in the public good in Massachusetts, Matthew. So there you go.
I'm sure they do.
Well, the thing that kills me is that, I've been in this long conversation on Twitter, which I haven't really been participating on because there's one guy who's been on it who's definitely carrying water for I hate Obamacare and all things in it. So it's like, yeah, okay, fine, I'm done. But the fact that the free market and insurers are how this, our whole problem would be solved if we would just get the government out of healthcare. But meanwhile, it's Anthem who's stroking you checks for what? You didn't even put out the money and they're stroking checks.
Well, there we go. This is the non-profit utility like Blue Cross of Massachusetts. This is not the
It's not Anthem.
streamlined, mega efficient for-profit Anthem. They would never do anything like that.
Well, the blues. I'm just going to say the blues could give a person the blues. I'm just saying. Yeah.
But look, I mean, everybody knows that there is, and this was in Stephen Brill's book, right, where he actually ended up with one of his EOBs, and he took it to the then CEO of United Healthcare and said, "Can you explain this?" And the guy went, "I don't know how it happened," and I've heard it was Ron, I'm like the guy was CEO of Aetna before Bertolini, and he said, "Look, we do whatever, how many million claims a year, and our error rate is down in the 0.23% number, but that's still a shitload of claims and things which just go haywire and go wrong." And this is just stuff that they're trying to get right before they get in the game that you're stuck in, Casey, of trying to move people from one drug to another because either they're getting a rebate from the PBM or whatever is going on in that game. So that there's a ton in that world. But
and meanwhile, welcome to the donut hole for Part D. If I did ask for coverage for the cancer med that I'm on, which is $15,000 a month, which I have not asked my Plan D to pay for because I know how the game is played and I figured that out. But meanwhile, they still won't pay the $50 a month for my pain med, but I'm saving them $15,000 a month on a cancer med. I'm not seeing the win for me here, really. From them.
You should be asking Mark or whomever for a cut of your the savings.
Well, I'm leery of actually using brand names for these people because it's like they could come for me, and I still haven't found my drug coverage for next year. But it rhymes with smell care.
All right. Okay.
Matthew, you went to the the health conference here.
I did, and I should have seen you, but I was so crazed, and
I was in California.
Oh, you're in California. Well, I'm in which case I apologize for not looking up and just as well. Yeah, it was. So going back to, let's talk a little bit about that because that'll wrap back to what JL was talking about, and I think it does bear mention. I am now of the thought, and Jess Master was on, she can't be on this week, but she's now talking about the shadow health system, right? Which is, there is now so much money in so many of these companies. And I was on a session with Columbia Business School this morning talking about this. But I mean, JL's right. The funding. I mean, Hinge Health just raised $400 million. Before that, it raised $300 million. It just does one thing. It just does, basically back and knee pain for employers, not even for people, in the 65 plus group. Yeah. I literally just had an interview with a lovely, which will be out on THCB shortly, with a lovely CEO of a company called Lindsay Juris Rosner, who's the CEO of a company called Wealthy. They raised about 50 million, and they're a caregiving company for employers. You may know them, Jen. I didn't know much about them, but I mean, there are. And I was kind of kidding with her, you raise $50 million, it's barely a rounding error, right? And yet, JL, if we go back to where we were 5 years ago, let alone 10 years ago, I mean, that would have been a huge round for anybody, so.
I mean, in 2016, Matthew. A $3 million Series A was like, a spike the football, take your victory lap because you just accomplished something huge, right?
Right.
Nowadays, you're seeing $20 million Series A's. There is a women's health company that raised $100 million with 2 physical locations and digital health in 2 states. So, I mean, you're talking about orders of magnitude difference from what was happening just 5 years ago. And honestly, just like orders of magnitude difference from what may have happened 2 years ago.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, this has been sort of geometric growth in terms of investment in this space.
So the question is, right? So some of this has been in entities who clearly are coming after the incumbents big time, right? So obviously it's the really big rounds for Devoted Health and some of the big rounds people like CityBlock and what have you. I mean, this is like we're trying to build using venture capital, PE or whatever dollars. We're trying to build a new healthcare system. Some of it is confused as to where it's going in terms of it, not necessarily the companies are confused, but it's not clear as to whether they're trying to do that or try to help the incumbents. So one of the things that happened at Health was there was a session off the show floor, which I was not invited to, so but of all of the general catalyst companies. So that includes Transcarent, Olive, Commure, Tendo, and a bunch of others. And all of them, if you're in the general catalyst portfolio, which is a big chunk of companies, many of whom received hundreds of millions of dollars. Commure is having 600 billion in so far. Jefferson, which is the system in Philadelphia that's not UPenn, has agreed that it's going to use those companies as its core technology platform. And to me, there's a real question as to, so maybe Jefferson thinks it can make the leap and become a brand name that sits on these technology platforms and starts delivering care, not just in Philadelphia, but, more widely. There's a real question to me as to whether the incumbents are able to make that leap. We've been talking about this on this show ever since it started as to how big a deal it's going to become. But if none of this stuff works and we go back to healthcare business as usual with the big systems in each locality managing their market share in each locality and fighting each other for local market share, and all the remote care, virtual care, care via the employer, all the stuff we've seen, kind of dribbles up and goes away. There's going to be a lot of wasted money. Doesn't mean it's going to work, but I mean, there have been some really serious people placing really serious bets. As I said this morning, Tiger Global, I don't know how much money Tiger Global has. I mean, trillions of dollars apparently, because they're spending hundreds of billions every week in healthcare now and presumably doing other sectors as well. But it seems to me that,
what's going to be the number that says that we're in tulip mania in healthcare now?
Well, I mean, we're kind of there. So if you look at, the 2 numbers I'll quote you, because we now have something we didn't have, go back to what Jay said, something we didn't have in 2016. I think Teladoc was public, Carside had gone public and was really sucking wind, and there may have been a couple of others who were public, but not many. And now there's about, I've got a list of them, which I look at every day. There's about 45 companies who are either sort of pure telehealth, digital health companies, or these new-fangled provider groups or payer groups, who are venture-backed, who are now publicly traded. And Babylon Health SPAC, did a SPAC last week. And if you look at that list, many of them are now way off their highs. They were trading high at the start of this year. They're way off their highs. I mean, by a factor of 2 or 3 in some cases. And if you add up the value, I'll give you one number. If you add up the value of 3 of the publicly traded plans, which is Clover, the Medicare Advantage plan, Bright Health, which does mostly consume employers, and Oscar, which does a bit of Medicare Advantage, but it's mostly on the exchange. The total market cap of those 3 is not as big as the valuation Devoted Health, which is the one that the Medicare Advantage plan run by the Park brothers of Athena Health fame. It's not as much, put together. So that's one thing, how expressive. And by the way, Devoted Health has 45,000 members at the moment. 45,000. Humana has 4.8 million Medicare Advantage members and is valued about 5 times their amount. So I think, we're at the tulip mania stage.
Yeah.
But the question is the sheer amount of money that's gone into these organizations enables them to build to do a bunch of stuff. And you're going to, something's going to happen.
Well, I hope so. But you say SPAC, and I'm reminded that, speaking of tulip mania, I think we might have SPAC tulip mania too, because himself he who shall not be named, Voldemort, the former occupant,
This SPAC, yes.
as a SPAC. So it's like,
I haven't checked, but that one was up about 5 times or whatever, from its original edition. Anyway, Jen, you're about to launch it, I think.
I think the question with a lot of the money that's being invested is it actually going to reduce healthcare and improve outcomes in any way? Because it seems now that there's just like a ton of really cool new stuff going on that might be improving the patient experience, but it may or may not be reducing costs or improving long-term outcomes. So I think there needs to be so much more scrutiny on which ideas get that kind of money and where things are actually going to make a meaningful impact on the healthcare system, or we're going to be spending like $1 out of every $2 in America on healthcare.
well, we're close to that now.
I know.
Wow, we're not that close. I
$4
have
trillion
actually,
a year. We're talking big, Senator Dirksen's real money now. Yeah.
it is real money, right? So I actually have, I had an interesting conversation about this at Health. There's a guy called Vidar Jorgensen who's run a lot of conferences and been hanging around the healthcare system for a long time. And Vidar, among his other things, owns a thing called the Validation Institute. And there's a guy called Al Lewis who used to be the kind of promo guy for disease management, and then turned around and became the heretic and said it's all a bunch of crap. And especially wellness and workplace wellness, he says it's a lot of the stuff that filters through the channels that you run, Jen, is his version of waste of money, and very, very poorly proved. And the Validation Institute was something that was kind of with him involved but not fronting it, was set up a while ago. It got changed hands a couple of times, and now Vidar owns it. The goal is to actually prove that your stuff works, right? And go and take this and prove that your stats are good, prove that your methodology is good, and do all this. And I have a couple of comments, right? One is that, well, that would have been nice for the rest of the healthcare system to have gone through that before we started doing all the stuff we do in the rest of the healthcare system. But the second is, I'm not sure how much that matters. And the class A, example A here is Livongo, right, which grew incredibly fast, didn't put out a peer-reviewed study about its, peer-reviewed classic, cost benefit analysis study until way late into its growth. The study it put out was not that special. Got criticized heavily by Al Lewis and amongst other people. Didn't seem to stop them growing with every employer, mostly because the business model worked and the enrollees and people with diabetes who went loved it.
Yeah.
So I don't know how much it matters for their growth, but I'm with you, it should happen. What I am seeing now, and by the way, in a sector I've been looking at a lot, which is mental health, this is even worse, right? What are you actually measuring? Who's measuring it? And who really joins in, and do they really get better, and how long is it for? And there's a lot of back and forth about that. And we have very, very nowhere, despite all this money going in and the huge amount, we haven't really got close to some answers. But I am seeing, a lot more seriousness now from certain people who like doing these studies in the clinical studies, and it's getting better. But we're still a long, long way from really answering your question, Jen. Does this stuff make any difference?
Yeah. I think with the well-being conversation, though, it's important to remember that most employers do not, ROI is not their number one goal with those programs. So you can get massive market share without showing ROI, because it's not really, the goal isn't reducing healthcare costs with those. It's making people feel good about their company, giving them different ways to take care of themselves and so forth. And with all the crazy explosion of new mental health programs and mental health benefits, that's going to be really interesting, whether there's more scrutiny on that on the employer side, or if it's just a lot of feel good programs that get put in place because we know there's so much demand.
And Matthew, I mean, this has been my area of obsession for, the last year. I mean, I think that the basis of competition, we like to think about efficacy and outcomes as, the basis of competition in healthcare. But I think that what's going on right now, the basis of competition is more around access and convenience, which is another very important problem, right? I mean, if you can't access healthcare, it doesn't matter how good it is, right? So I think that where we are now is a Helm's Deep battle for market share, right? I think that in the mid 2000s, when ZocDoc and Frisia and those guys were coming up, they were like, we're going to sell a technology that helps these incumbents provide healthcare more efficiently. And I think people realize like there's only so much you can change the existing system. So I think that these literally billions of dollars, and I think we're probably, how much has been invested? Tens of billions, maybe almost $100 billion in this space, probably in the last 3 years.
Boy,
This is just a massive aerial assault. This is, Saruman's army on this end, right, with all the venture money, and then on the other side you have the established, like, hyper consolidated systems that are the legacy players in their castle, and this is going to be literally like a mega battle. And I can't remember if that's from Lord of the Rings, A Hobbit.
It's Lord of the Rings. It's Lord of the Rings.
But this is the battle at Helm's Deep, and it really is the battle for market share and who controls the market, who controls the customer. And I think that issues related to efficacy and outcomes and all that stuff, that's going to come out in the wash, right? That'll be the secondary concern. But I think what we're seeing now is arguably like potentially the biggest shift in market share and who controls that market share in the history of the American healthcare system. And I think we're living actually in a very historic time. And it can be difficult to understand that because so much other stuff is going on,
Yeah.
Joe, before we leave all this, let me ask you what, so you're running this still stage, a really small early stage startup in the substance use disorder area. That's got incredibly hot. I think a company which had only raised a few million before raised 120 million last year.
Yep.
I think the name.
Work it.
Thank you. And there are numerous others who raised big amounts in that arena. What is the impact you're seeing on when you're trying to recruit clients and the way you're doing? I mean, is this filtering through to the end patient that they realize there are all these different types of choices now available to them? Is it getting, when you're talking about to employers or talking to end users or other doctors, are we having an impact on the system? Because Sachin Jain from who's now at Scam, has been around and corresponds about this, talks a lot about how we have the innovation, the health innovation group and then the health delivery group, and then the two of them never actually meet, and there's no connection. Doing that bridge has been crossed. Are you hearing about this stuff?
Excellent question. So I talk to 50 to 100 clients, patients per week, right? So I see patients, I prescribe medication, as well as being the CEO of my company. I would say that patient awareness of a lot of these new technologies is minimal, right? I think if I would talk to 100 people in a week, 50 people in a week, maybe 5 of them may have heard of some of these very well-financed startups. I think there's 2 reasons for that. I think one, remember, a lot of this money has only recently been invested in these companies. So it hasn't been deployed on subway ads and PPC and all the other things that are important to building awareness. A second thing is a lot of these programs are being deployed via employee benefit kind of channels, right? So you have to go into the employer, you have to educate the HR department, they have to get you into the benefit stack, and that obviously takes time to build awareness there. So I think that's it. And then look, the third issue is addiction is a huge, addiction is 20 million people. Mental health is probably, another 50 million people. So it is a very large population of people that you have to educate about this issue. So in many ways, I think the reason so much money is coming into this space, it is a huge opportunity with just a huge TAM, total addressable market. And, I think we'll be talking about behavioral health and mental health for a long time. And there are many, many different segments that can be serviced profitably.
Jen, in your world, when you're in that stack of, if it was easy for employers to find out about the benefits, you wouldn't have a job. So,
Exactly.
so how do you think the community, the general understanding of communications is going?
It varies so much employer to employer and sector to sector, because some companies invest a ton of resources in getting their people educated about benefits and well-being and everything that's offered. And others don't, they just do the bare minimum. They just do what's required by law, which is basically nothing. So it's hugely different. Still, most people don't know much about healthcare. They don't know much about their benefits. Even in companies that do a lot of communication, there's still huge gaps. And if you look at something like health savings accounts, which have been around now for over 15 years, most people still have no idea what they are. They couldn't tell you whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, whether it's different from an FSA, whether you could enroll in them with any old plan or not. There's just these huge gaps in baseline knowledge. And that's going to be there for a while.
So what you're telling me is that even though I've signed the deal with ABC, big employer, as whatever well-funded company, and I can get through, but my engagement recruitment rate is still going to be,
it's still
tough.
It's still a big challenge. I mean, this is what we do for our clients, is try to get the benefits information into people's hands. And we work with some providers as well. And it's a big lift. And especially right now, if you're not in the top 3 things that an employer cares about, you're not going to get any airtime. So a lot of these niche programs and niche providers, and I've probably said this before, but I talk to so many founders and I ask them how they're going to get people to actually use their service. And they say, oh, well, we're just going to have the CEO send everyone an email and they're all going to sign up. I'm like, that's just not the way.
That's not how it works.
Yeah. But even with mental health, where a lot of companies have invested in a lot of new programs and we've put a ton of attention on it, and managers are talking about it, the C-suite's talking about it, everyone's talking about mental health, there's still this huge gap between what is being used and what people actually need. So there's many of our clients are frustrated that they're not seeing people actually access the benefits when they know clearly people need them. And there are all sorts of reasons that could be going on, from a stigma type thing to administrative complexity. And, there's just so many ways, so many things that get in the way of people taking care of themselves.
So I'll throw out there, Michael, I mean, the private sector left to its own devices is not necessarily going to be working toward what we need collectively. Well, I'll call it the public good, right? So trying to collectively bring down healthcare costs so we as a society can afford all the things that we need, like Casey's example, when things are really acute and need to be covered, they should be. And then the kind of fluff stuff that, in Boston, we have the Institute for Clinical and Economic Review, ICER, that reviews drugs and issues a report that says, these are the drugs that had huge price increases that really didn't merit the price increase. Like, there's not a evidence-based reason for it, but they just sort of made money while they could. I mean, there's a lot of information out there, but to actually harness it and use it, I don't think we can rely on the employer community. I mean, this is not their top priority. Employers are in business to actually do their core function, their core business. So I come back to government having some kind of role and opportunity. And to just tie it to the pieces that I put that you published on the healthcare blog, state-based exchanges, we think about states being like laboratories of democracy. They can also be laboratories for this kind of innovation in terms of how healthcare is purchased. And we gave the example of Covered California in your home state that has really met the definition of being an active purchaser and trying to be smart about where, which health plans they allow on and whether they're actually trying to improve health outcomes and where's the evidence. And so that's something that's really an opportunity that I don't think is the heavy hand of government. It's not complete regulation, but it's trying to harness some of the market forces and put them toward the public good.
Yeah.
This is the thing that just kills me is, the fact that U.S. healthcare.
I thought nothing could do that, Casey.
Well, yeah, it's many have tried. Many have tried. I'm still here, but the thing that just that kills me, and it has for decades that I've been alive, is why we're expecting the U.S. healthcare system to be basically run and paid for by the employers of America, not as though every single person who gets healthcare gets, their healthcare coverage through their employer, but the lion's share do, or at least historically have. I haven't looked at the percentages in the last year or two, but it was right around just 50% of U.S. working adults were covered by an employer plan of some type. And that still leaves a lot of people who either are, however they cover their healthcare, it's not through an employer plan. And, having been someone who was employed and then was freelance and a union member for a long time, and I had a union plan, and then was a small business owner and negotiated a small business plan for myself and my then husband so that we could have health insurance. And that was the coverage that I had during my first go round with cancer. Now I'm I have Medicare. And classic Medicare, original, not Medicare Advantage, because I'm not stupid. But at the same time, it's like this weird game. Everybody talks about the gamification of healthcare. Well, healthcare in America has been a game for a very long time. And it's the game of, are you employed? And if you're not, if you are employed and your employer doesn't cover you, how can you figure out how to even be in this game? And then a lot of people basically opt out of, if they don't have employer coverage, and even with employer coverage, depending on what the rules are, they opt out of getting a lot of care that would help them stay healthy, because either it's not covered or, it's whatever. It's a ridiculous game and lies we tell ourselves as a nation and a culture, that it's like, well, the market will solve this.
Right.
Well, they won't, because you've created the healthcare as an industry has created such terror in the hearts of its users that they will even need to deal with it at all. If I have to go in that building, I'm really screwed. So I'm just going to not go in there. And so as a result, they end up arriving, washing up, as it were, in the, halls of medicine. And they're way worse off than they would have been if they had been given a platform and access, a foundational way of getting at care and understanding their own bodies and acting in their own interest. But no, that's not how we do things here. So here we are.
So let me push you a little bit back on the Medicare Advantage bit, right? So there's a lot of fuss at the moment. In fact, Don Burbeck and Rick Gilfillan, have come out and basically said that they had this same presentation, which I saw a presentation I saw them. They wrote a piece in Health Affairs, and then I saw a presentation of it about the Medicare Advantage money machine, basically, and how risk adjustment is essentially taking money from the current Medicare program, including away from people like you pay for Part B and the current program, but also from the taxpayer mostly, by cranking up the overall sickness and the overall cost of the system, and basically putting more money in the Medicare Advantage plans, which in their view, which I think anyone would disagree, has led to, more profitability than you would otherwise see for those plans, more profitability for their provider groups, like the Oak Streets and the ChenMeds who they are working with, and in some cases buying, so they can get both sides of that. Humana and Optum are both in the provider business as well as the payer business Medicare Advantage. But also it's, pays for gym memberships and a bunch of nice stuff and, some drug coverage and whatever else for the people who go into it. So I look at this and go, well, if I was in the Medicare, if I was in I guess
if you were over 65,
if I was not, I'm going. Am I 2 years away? I thought I was going to be 2 years away, but I'm 7 years away. Okay, but I'm looking and go, it looks like not a bad deal, rather than paying the deductibles and the other stuff for standard Medicare. So number one, there's this controversy about the cost and what will be in there, and we know that in 1997, when was it? When was they reduced payments to Medicare? Then Medicare Risk and that program, Medicare Plus.
Yeah, it was around
that. Came down. A lot of people left the program, and then they put the payments back up in the 2003 Medicare Modernization Act, once you did Part D, and then it's been growing like crazy ever since, and there's been games been played. But why are you so opposed to it? Why do you think that people are stupid to join it?
Well, as an actual sick person, ASP, aforementioned stage 4 cancer. One of the reasons when I aged into Medicare that I went for original Medicare is because all the plans that I looked at under Medicare Advantage, just out of curiosity, because at the time I traveled a lot, and looking at the network architecture of most of the Medicare Advantage plans that I would see, I did not want to put myself in the way of being a covered life in Virginia who got sick in Chicago at a conference and ended up with even more bills because of network issues than so I just said, you know what, the hell with it. I'm going for Medicare fee for service, classic original Medicare, because, with a supplement and, yes, I'm paying out of pocket for some other things. But I will say that the top line cost, my cost, or like what the top line number is that various ones have been billed on my behalf for the care that I've received, including a 5-day inpatient stay this year, and all the other fun that I've been having, is right around $300,000. And of which I have not had to, other than my Part D, the drug coverage, shell out that much of my own guilt on this, because I have that supplement. Now, if I just had Part A, Part B, and the drug coverage, I'd be on the hook for probably somewhere in the tens of thousands at this point. But with the supplement that I have, I've ended up, I was even told by the hospital who was discharging me back in June, because I live in an apartment building that has steps out front. And I said, no, you're going to send me home in an ambulance because I'm not navigating those steps straight out of a hospital bed. So, well, you might get a bill for that. Say, you know what? That's okay. I'll pay it but because of the combination of stuff that I have, no bill. But the Medicare Advantage plans that I have had friends who've ended up getting sick after 65 who were under Medicare Advantage, if they got really sick, their plans, they discovered all kinds of, like you have to spend up to, other things are capped. And, so if their bill went over X, then they were responsible. And there's just a lot of hidden surprises in there, like any other managed care thing that I've seen outside of Kaiser or Geisinger, really. Those are the only managed care orgs that I've seen not screw the people that they're taking care of. I'm not convinced that Medicare Advantage is any benefit to its users if they get sick. It feels good. I have coverage, and they tell you all this wonderful stuff in their TV ads about how all your dental is whatever. And if you're below a certain income, you get money back on your Social Security, all this junk they blather at you in those 30 to 60 second ads. But if you dive in on the back end, it's, there's a big bunch of trapdoors that you could find yourself standing on that you didn't know were even there. So I went for old school.
Yeah, no,
and Matthew, I would argue.
Go.
So I went through this same decision-making process with my mother, who is also a breast cancer survivor. I would argue that the happiest, most satisfied, insured people in the United States are people who have, or who qualify, are people who have classic Medicare plus a supplement.
Amen, brother. Amen. 100%.
It is like an awesome product. Every provider takes it. It's very simple in terms of, from an administrative standpoint, that combination is a great product.
Exactly. And from my perspective, we would do better to shore that up and make that much more workable, sustainable, instead of, these every year or two, it's like, oh my God, the trust fund's going to run out of money, or, and then all this ridiculous brinksmanship that goes on over the budget and continuing resolutions in DC. But the fact that Medicare Advantage happened was because of some of the, the issues around people's understanding of the need for a supplement. And, but again, because I took advice from folks who are a few years older than me, but are in my zone, in other words, other, people who have a lot of expertise, both on the patient side and the business side of various parts of healthcare. And so, to a person, none of us are on Medicare Advantage because no, that's not how we play.
So I mean, what I've seen, right, in this argument is that, and by the way, a large proportion of Medicare Advantage members are lower income who can't afford the supplemental plans, et cetera, so that there is some of that going on clearly. The argument
and
you would get.
It depends. And, if you're an older person who has been dealing with chronic conditions for a very long time, and you don't travel a lot, and you tend to stick in your village and you don't go places, and then if you can put together a provider network under the rubric of a Medicare Advantage plan that works for you, okay, fine.
I mean, if Rashika Van Oppley was on this call from IORA, he would say that it enables you to go via Medicare Advantage to get to somebody like an IORA, and we do primary care, chronic care management, everything for those seniors in a very different way, which when I look at it, looks a lot more humane and interesting than a lot of what happens out there in fee-for-service. If you look at Medicare fee-for-service as a whole, not from your particular experience or the experience I will get in 7 years or whatever, but from the system-wide experience, we know a couple of things. One is historically, it's been inflationary. There's been wide variation in both care quality and the amount of care delivered to the same type of customers. And it's, although in recent years it's managed to contain costs by basically holding the line on pricing, it's also been very, very hard within the way that we pay for Medicare fee-for-service because of the RUC, because of the way the resource.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the RUC is not. The RUC is not something that Medicare created, or
Yeah, but it drives what it does drive. Right?
Oh, I know.
Is that more specialty care and less primary care in Medicare, right? So you can.
Yeah, exactly.
You do puppets here, I don't know what you're doing.
I'm squeezing.
You squeeze the thing on one end, it's going to shoot out the other.
Right. But I mean, if you were to look at, you just said Kaiser and Geisinger, as I call them, Geisinger, right? If you look at those primary care based big traditional HMO systems, which have all the best in general, have all the best quality scores. I know there are people who hate Kaiser and will go out lengths about terribleness. If you look at them, they don't look like the way they deal with their seniors. They do not look like Medicare fee-for-service. I've had people I know complain about Kaiser being not giving people the inpatient treatment they felt they needed, and et cetera, et cetera. But they tend to have a system of care. And typically, Medicare fee-for-service, unless you are, on the one hand, I don't know if I'm pointing in the right way that people watching this, because I'm, on the one hand, an activist patient who knows a lot about your care. On the other hand, have a son who is a Columbia-trained MD, right? I don't know many people have that. So I like the idea of somebody doing a better job. I'm more concerned that we're, as a taxpayer, that we're just, not that anyone cares about a taxpayer anymore. Maybe after today or this week or whatever Nancy Pelosi does, whatever she's going to do, the taxpayer will be different. But I'm more concerned that that we're making a bunch of people at Humana and United and maybe potentially at Oak Street richer than they should be, and giving them and enabling them to get away with stuff. Even Kaiser's being accused of defrauding.
Oh yeah, it's like $4 billion a year. Don't you want a little slice of that?
Well, I'm sure I've worked for Kaiser over the years, and I'm sure I'm guilty as hell as anybody else. But if you can get past that, I mean, the way I like the concept of having a more rational primary care based system, which we're more likely to get through with Medicare Advantage. I'm not convinced about the way direct contracting is going. I'm not convinced about the way the money's flowing. And the thing that worries me is more what you said, is there are trapdoors, right? There are things that you can't get that you need because Medicare Advantage looks good on the front end. You get the gym membership, but if it's whatever level of cancer, it's back to like you can't get that drug, whereas Medicare fee-for-service would give it to you. Yeah. But we know there are lots of holes in Medicare fee-for-service, and we know that historically.
Well, I mean, there's holes in the American healthcare delivery system from front to back and in and out and back and sideways. The entire sphere, holes everywhere. It's a wiffle ball. But it just, this is the thing that drives me crazy, is that we keep calling, the collective we, America, we call ourselves all kinds of, this American exceptionalism. Everything is wonderful. We're the best place ever. OMG, are we cool or what? But then you don't even have to pick up the hood. All you have to do, you see all the oil leaking and the tires are flat, and half the people can't even get in the freaking car. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
I'm with you.
And it's like, if we would just stop telling each other these lies about how wonderful we are, we might start tackling some of these problems. But no, we'd rather tell ourselves lies.
I thought we were going to make the country great again at any moment. Anyway,
don't go there.
All right. Stop. Okay, so we only have 10 minutes left. I do want to raise that something that all four of you have got great experience with, which is the caregiving / for people with cancer. I know between you, there's great collective, not either having it or being a caregiver for it on this panel, and I'm the only one who doesn't. So you raised a couple of points, Jen. You did as well, Rosemarie.
Just you wait.
Sorry, we only have 10
Just
minutes.
you wait.
Well, I'm hoping to, I want to be like my dad. I'll have a heart attack when I'm feeding my chickens and not bother anybody. I hope that nobody shows up with, fingers crossed for me, but I'm in a minority here, right? Clearly in this panel. So I'd love, Jen, you mentioned right at the start, you want to talk a bit about the treatment we give people with cancer. Casey, obviously you're in the middle of that. I know JL and Rosemarie, you know a ton about this. So we don't have much time. Can you just sort of get back to that point, Jen, and sort of give me where you think we are and where the holes are?
Well, one of the things that I'm most interested in right now, just personally, is the long-term diagnostic stuff. So I had cancer when I was 19. That plus my family history, I'm in a very high risk category for breast cancer. If I were to follow the actual protocols, that means that every 6 months I would have either an MRI or a mammogram. Those MRIs have gadolinium in them, which is a heavy metal that shows up in a blood test for me in pretty significant levels, even though it's supposed to leave your body right away. So that's a particular topic that I'm really interested in personally at the moment, because no one really planned for someone to have that type of screening for 30 or 40 or 50 years. And so, what kind of issues does that create when it's trying to solve others? And this is a conversation I'm having with my providers at UCSF all of the time. And I just think it's a fascinating topic, and there's a lot of there's a lot of different perspectives on kind of how much diagnostics is the right amount. But every test has a side effect to it as well.
So you asked that's a really interesting point, and I'm going to make a note of that because I'm on that protocol of the every 6 months. But I would say a big, huge gap is it's racial disparities. And so in the breast cancer space, Black women are underdiagnosed. They are not, all because of all the issues related to access in the healthcare system and stereotypes, and then inadequate research about the patterns of breast cancer. I heard a fascinating talk by an African-American woman who's based in New York, who is doing a lot of that research and just kind of following the ethnic patterns, like migration patterns, and where things cropped up, and like why certain strains of breast cancer are happening more for Black women than for white women. And it's all traceable, but it wasn't being paid attention to adequately. So we need to rectify that, along with screenings, mammograms, et cetera. And we got set back, frankly, because of COVID, and people just are still not coming back in to get screened at the rates that they used to. So we already had a gap pre-COVID. It's worse now. So that's where a gap overall is.
Yeah.
And Matthew, I mean, from my experience, not only did my mother have breast cancer, but my dad was diagnosed with a brain tumor 3 months after that. So, what I would say that the key problem is care coordination. I just essentially had to stop working. You may remember, I was working with you at that time. And
yes, I remember. Where the hell did you go? Don't worry. Did I remember to stop paying you?
and
an American boss, I would have.
And essentially what I had to do was I had to take the whole team on my back, and I was coordinating care across so many different types of providers. And essentially, the healthcare system is like an objectivist dream, basically everybody working in their own self-interest and really nobody looking out for the patient except for maybe the patient themselves, or if the patient has a very, very sophisticated family member who has the time to do it. And the crazy thing is, for both my mother and much more so for my father, because his situation was much more complicated, I saved United Healthcare $1 million on keeping my dad out of the hospital because I knew what I was doing, right? And I never got a thank you note. I never got a check. I never got anything from United Healthcare. And I'd say that, this care coordination problem is a real issue that has real economic consequences, put aside the health outcomes consequences. And once somebody can figure out that is an opportunity, I think there's actually a very big business to be built around care coordination and managing care for very complex patients.
Yeah.
We need to cue Alexandra Drain.
Who
And
was on last week? Who was talking about that?
oh, right.
The
But,
care
it's like,
perspective,
okay, I
but-
know that's a zone she's in right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
But, I mean, I have, like JL was saying, a, direct experience dealing with my parents, managing my parents' care hands-on for like the last 2.5 years of their lives. And then I got a 5-year break and a cancer diagnosis. And yes, okay, I'm supposed to pivot into healthcare now. But I went bankrupt caregiving. There's some other complicating factors. But that was 2.5 years where basically I couldn't do anything but take care of my parents and deal with my then husband's, keeping his business afloat. I was successful on both counts, but by myself, I was a trash fire by the time that was all over. But I'm still here and I'm still living indoors. So I guess I win, but I guess I'm still here. But it was not as though I was surprised by any of it, but it was a real wake-up call that it's like, yes, it's just as toxic as I thought it was to try to deal with really complicated issues inside the US healthcare system. And this was, my parents' thing was like 99 to the end of 2002. So we didn't have digital health yet, although we did have the internet and there was email, thank God. And I was, driving up and down I-95 with a Palm Pilot and a flip phone back in the day. And, but that was one of the ways that I was able to sort of, keep all the wheels on the various buses as I was driving my own bus back and forth. But it just, to see a system, a healthcare system suck up basically the GDP of a developed nation every year.
More than that.
And well, 4 trillion a year. I think
we're about Germany now.
Real money. But
to
see a system just suck this up every year and utterly resist any kind of disruption to its revenue model is just like, what? So I don't know. I don't have a brilliant fix other than maybe we need to storm the castle.
Well, so I mean, my sense is there's a couple things. One is that we need a lot more sort of research about how this goes in cancer, particularly. And Jen's point about the test she's having. We know there are people who have got recurrent cancer from the radiation treatment they got for their previous cancer. There's certainly there's a lot of that going on, and we didn't know what we didn't know maybe, but there's a lot more work to be done in that. And how do you manage this as it becomes a long-term chronic disease rather than something 30 or 40, 50 years ago that just killed you right straight away. So that's one big chunk. The other chunk is, jail saved $1 million. And he probably did, right? Now part of what Medicare Advantage is supposed to do, part of what the navigators, whether and Jess ran the panel with the folks from Grand Rounds, now called Included Health, Transcarent, and Accolade. Now they're all working with employers. You probably need, it's a crazy system for employees, but I think people in Medicare and seniors need it even more, and Medicaid. Right? Everyone needs this help to get around this system. When you're chronic, when you're seriously ill, it's a mess. We all know it's a mess, and there's no help, right? So my sense is that if I was to say, I don't think Medicare for Fee Service as it is. Yes, maybe those people are happy, but there should be a lot more help in terms of that navigation piece. Now, where it comes from, does it come from the employer? Does it come from a third party? Does it come from a plan? Does it have to be, should it come from some kind of social community group? Should we be training people? I don't know how we fix that, but I'm seeing a lot more interest in that simply because everyone knows the whole thing is a freaking mess, whether you're a caregiver, whether you're a patient. And it's not great, even for jail, it's for the professionals in the system, because yes, they're in their silos and stuff happens and they feel terrible that something bad happens to the patient because they didn't know about some other incident or whatever, even to the fact that there are people in hospital dying because there are multiple drugs given by multiple doctors who didn't know that the other drug had been given. So I'd say that, cancer is the area where, and there's a couple of new companies out around cancer navigation, and, let's hope something happens there, because that's one where the experience is, for those of you who know.
But all I see that doing is widening the disparities, because if you're me or you have a me or, whatever, great. But if not, how do you access anything?
I think we have to get everyone, but go back to where we're talking about with the city block store. We have to get people up and down we're spending the money anyway at some point. And if we can save $1 million on JL's dad not going to hospital for, the 3 months or whatever, because he did great stuff, that we can't scale. Well, maybe we can scale jail. There may be ways that we can, put him in, make a piece of jail software that becomes the, and then we have lower, obviously you don't have to be necessarily a Columbia MD MBA to run the thing, right? But it would be good if we could make that available. And why can't that be available for dual eligibles on Medicaid living in low income neighborhoods?
Why can't we pay primary care enough to do it?
Well, maybe that's one of the answers. If Rashika Fanopoulos from IRA was on here today, he'd say that's what we're going to do. That's what they're doing.
A quick little, like lift the ruck. You know what I mean? Lift the ruck. Yeah.
All right. With that, we're very close to the end of our time. We're going slightly over, so we've got to get off, but we'll still end the way. So, what do we think's happening in the next little bit? I'm going to start with you, Jen.
I don't know, that whole cancer conversation got my head in a totally different direction. All
right, I'll let you go. Rosemary's going to tell us exactly what's going to pass.
I know, I was going to say, Rose will tell us exactly what will pass.
No, I'm afraid I can't, but I will say open enrollment is starting for all of the ACA exchanges, state and federal. So that's on November 1st, which is right around the corner. And 3 new states have joined the state exchange rank. So I'm always happy to see that. So anyway, and it's the first open enrollment post he who shall not be named. So and with these extra subsidies. So I think a lot more people are going to get insured.
Excellent. Casey, what are you looking at?
Was that me? You tagged me?
That's you. Yes, you tagged.
Okay.
You're telling us you're equipped for next week.
I'm curious to see if the Cancer Drug Parity Act is folded in, and in this ginormous thing that's grinding its way through the sausage machine up there in DC. I'm curious to see. I would like to see that happen. And other than that, I'm just going to spend the next week being happy to be alive and causing trouble. Because that's what I do.
You spend every week doing that? All right, I'll go on.
Well, no, every week I'm happy to be alive and I cause trouble.
All right, JL.
Non-healthcare palate cleanser. I don't know if you followed the Evergrande story in China, a huge property developer that is facing insolvency that could impact the global economy. So I've been following that story, reading up as much as I can, because I can only deal with healthcare about 80 hours a week. So I got to take the other 88 hours and figure out something else to do with them.
Excellent. Jen.
Oh, back to me.
You weren't going to go away.
relentless.
I mean, it's just it's open enrollment on the exchanges, and for most employers, almost all of our clients are starting in the next week or so. So it'll be really interesting to see how things shuffle around, and we have lots of new plan designs being tested out next year. So I still have faith in innovation on the employer side, despite I'm not thinking that it's the end all be all for fixing healthcare.
Yeah. So I'm sort of, my takeaway is that I was thrilled to go to HLTH and go to lots of parties and have venture capitalists via their funding companies buy me free drinks, which is something I particularly encourage because I hate paying for my own drinks. But it was great to get out and see people and have a lot of conversations. And we're back in that active world. That's a lot of fun. Obviously, that's a world I've lived in a lot and really enjoy, and very glad to see that coming back. I did like the way the HLTH had everyone do there was a bit of mess up in the getting there, but had everyone do a COVID test, and it felt pretty safe and pretty normal. So I'm hoping they get back to normal. I am particularly concerned about the variation that's cropping up in Eastern Europe and the UK, whether that's going to be worse and sort of go past the vaccines, and kids are going to get back. I'm looking at my kids getting vaccinated, and whatever. So I'm hoping that the COVID thing is that we're in another area where we might be pushing the ball down the hill and getting back to normalcy. I hope so, but we've been here before and haven't made it. So that's one thing. And then JL mentioned China. I continue, everything is romping along in the world. Everything seems to be great. There's a bunch of weird stuff going on between the Russians and the Germans and whatever. But the thing I'm consistently concerned about is if the whole thing takes a left turn, and the big flashpoint looks to me to be Taiwan. I don't know what's going on between the mainland Chinese and the Taiwanese, but there seems to be a rattling of sabers there. And, if that goes into actual physical conflict, all bets are off for the future of everything we talk about, because so much of our supply chain and everything else, semiconductors and God knows what, let alone the foreign policy impact of what that would be, is going to be coming at us. So I have my fingers crossed that cooler heads prevail, and I hope there are some cool heads.
And Matthew, by the way, I don't know if you saw, but the India Modi is pointing missiles at China now. So I mean, we've got we've lived this Pax Americana for a long time, man. That's the story of my life certainly, and
if healthcare wasn't depressing enough, now you've got us on.
And now foreign policy is really screwing us up.
All right. Next week on the THCB Foreign Policy Gang, we'll be discussing India, China, Russia.
We're on climate change too, just for some real fun.
Hang on, there's been a little problem with my sharing things. And Rosemarie's decided to bring climate change, which, by the way, has massive impacts on all the rest of it. And there's that big meeting this week coming up in Glasgow, or Glasgow, as it's been told by many in the American media. So let's hope something comes, and that's the depressing topic as well, which we don't cover on THCB Gang, perhaps should. All right, with that, I hope you've enjoyed THCB Gang. This is episode 70. It's really episode 69, but Alex Drain demanded that 68 be called 69 because she's like that. Last week, I'm Matthew Holt, THCB founder and the publisher. You can find me at Baltimore on Twitter. We had Casey Quinlan. You can find her at Mighty Casey from Richmond, Virginia. Rosemarie Day, Rosemarie _ day 1 on Twitter from Boston, Massachusetts. Jen Benz from the crazy town of San Francisco, which survived the week better than Marin County, but not much, at Jen Benz. And Jail Neptune, never leaving the island of Manhattan because it's too scary to get off it, at John Luke Neptune on Twitter. There's Matthew saying, thank you for watching. If you're listening on the podcast, thanks for listening on the podcast. And we will see you same time, same place, which will be November the 5th, next week, Thursday at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern.